Here is another retirement risk that does not get nearly enough attention until it is too late. And by the time most people realize it, the damage is already done. Many retirees walk into their golden years with a quiet assumption baked into their financial plan that they will be in a lower tax bracket once they stop working, and therefore those traditional IRA and 401k accounts will be taxed at a friendlier rate when they finally start drawing them down. It sounds reasonable on the surface, but here is the uncomfortable truth that assumption tends to ignore. Between large required minimum distributions that the IRS forces you to take starting in your early 70s, Social Security income, and the very real possibility that tax rates climb higher in the coming decades, many retirees find themselves in a tax bracket that is anything but lower. And when you run the actual numbers, you could be handing 20 to 30% of what you thought was your money straight to the federal government. That is the part that stings the most. If your entire life savings sits inside traditional tax-deferred accounts, you do not actually own all of that money, not in the way you think you do. The IRS has been a silent partner in that account from day one, patiently waiting for their cut, and they get to decide the terms when the bill finally comes due. The government does not share in your losses, but they will absolutely show up for their share of the gains at the moment that is most inconvenient for you. Now, before we dive in, let me be clear about who this video is designed for. If you are somewhere between 5 and 15 years away from retirement, this is your video. You are probably doing the right things. You are saving consistently, maybe maxing out your 401k, watching your portfolio grow, and feeling reasonably confident about the future. And that is genuinely great. But here is the thing. Doing the right things is not always enough if you do not know what is coming. There are specific risks that tend to blindside even the most financially responsible pre-retirees, not because they were careless, but because nobody warned them. This video is not about scaring you. It is not doom and gloom. Think of it as a practical preparation guide, the kind of honest conversation a trusted financial mentor would have with you over coffee. Knowledge is protection, and that is exactly what we are building here today. Now let's talk about the first risk, and honestly one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of retirement planning. It's called sequence of returns risk. Most people focus on one question when building their retirement portfolio. What's my average return going to be? And while that matters, it's actually not the whole story. What matters just as much, sometimes even more, is when your losses happen. Think about this. A major market crash in year one of your retirement is dramatically more damaging than that exact same crash happening 10 years into retirement. Why? Because in those early years, you're withdrawing money to live on. When the market drops and you're pulling funds out simultaneously, you're locking in losses and leaving fewer dollars available to recover when the market bounces back. That combination, withdrawals plus losses, can permanently derail a retirement portfolio in ways that the same average return number would never reveal on paper. Let me make this real for you with two people. Call them David and Susan. Both retire with $500,000. Both average a 6% return over 20 years. On paper, identical. But David experiences big losses in his first 2 years, then enjoys strong gains later. Susan gets those strong gains early and faces losses later. David runs out of money before year 16. Susan still has over $400,000 at year 20. Same average return. Completely opposite outcomes. Here is why this hits so hard. When David loses 30% in year one, he is also withdrawing $40,000 to live on. He is selling investments at rock-bottom prices, permanently locking in those losses. His portfolio never gets the chance to recover. Susan's early gains build a cushion that absorbs her later losses without devastating her withdrawals. The sequence, not the average, determined everything. So how do you actually protect yourself from sequence of returns risk? The good news is there are practical strategies you can start using right now. First, consider building a cash buffer. Having 1 to 2 years of living expenses in cash or stable assets means you never have to sell investments during a downturn just to pay your bills. You simply draw from your buffer while your portfolio recovers. Second, explore the bucket strategy. This involves dividing your retirement savings into short-term, medium-term, and long-term buckets, each invested differently based on when you will need the money. Third, gradually reduce your equity exposure as retirement approaches. This does not mean abandoning growth entirely, but shifting toward a more balanced allocation reduces your vulnerability during those critical early years. Remember, it is not just about what your money earns, it is about when losses happen. Timing matters just as much as total returns. But here is where inflation gets even more dangerous. And this is the part most financial conversations completely skip over. General inflation is one thing, but medical inflation is an entirely different beast. Healthcare costs have historically risen at 2 to 3 times the rate of general inflation, and the numbers are staggering when you actually look at them clearly. Current estimates suggest that a healthy 65-year-old couple may need somewhere between $315,000 and $415,000 just to cover out-of-pocket medical expenses throughout retirement. And that figure does not include a single day of long-term care, not one day. That is purely routine healthcare costs for 2 relatively healthy people. Now add the long-term care reality. If you or your spouse requires nursing home care, you are looking at costs that can easily exceed $100,000 per year. A single extended illness, a stroke, a fall that leads to cognitive decline, any one of these events can begin liquidating a lifetime of careful saving within months, not years. This is not a worst-case scenario reserved for the unlucky few. This is a statistical probability that millions of retirees face every single year, completely unprepared. The question you need to ask yourself right now is simple. Does your current retirement plan have a real, concrete answer for this risk? Because if it does not, everything else you have built could be at stake. Here is what makes inflation especially dangerous for retirees specifically. Workers get raises, bonuses, and promotions that often keep pace with rising costs. Retirees, for the most part, do not. Their income is largely fixed, while their expenses keep climbing. And the categories retirees spend the most on, healthcare and housing, inflate significantly faster than the general rate. Healthcare costs have historically risen at roughly 5 to 6% annually. Housing, including maintenance, property taxes and insurance, follows a similar aggressive trend. So while the general inflation rate might average 3%, the real inflation rate hitting your retirement budget could be considerably higher. Think about this. If you retire at 62 feeling financially comfortable, that same income 15 years later could feel genuinely suffocating. The numbers that looked generous in your early retirement years may barely cover essentials by your late 70s. This is not a scare tactic, it is math. And the good news is, there are real strategies to fight back. So how do you actually fight back against inflation in retirement? The first move is keeping a meaningful portion of your portfolio in equities. Yes, stocks carry risk, but they also deliver long-term growth that historically outpaces inflation. Completely abandoning the market in retirement can actually hurt you more than help you. Next, consider Treasury inflation-protected securities, commonly known as TIPS. These are government bonds specifically designed to rise with inflation, making them a reliable hedge for the fixed income portion of your portfolio. But perhaps the most powerful tool is optimizing your income sources that automatically adjust over time. Delaying Social Security, even by a few years, locks in a higher base benefit that grows with cost of living adjustments annually. Certain annuity structures also offer inflation riders that increase your payout over time. The goal is building a retirement income plan where your money does not just last, It keeps pace with the rising cost of living throughout your entire retirement. Now let's talk about the third risk, and this one tends to stop people cold when they hear the number. The average couple retiring today will need over $300,000 just to cover healthcare expenses throughout retirement. And here is the part that makes it even more alarming. That figure does not include long-term care costs, which we will get to shortly. $300,000 just for healthcare. When most pre-retirees hear that, their first reaction is disbelief, because they have been counting on Medicare to handle it. They assume that once they hit 65, healthcare is essentially taken care of, and they can stop worrying about it. But that assumption is one of the most expensive mistakes a retiree can make. Medicare is valuable, absolutely, but it is not the comprehensive safety net most people believe it to be, and the gaps it leaves behind can quietly drain a retirement portfolio faster than almost anything else. Now that you understand the staggering cost of healthcare in retirement, let's talk about why so many people are caught off guard. Medicare is not free, and it is far from complete. Most retirees pay premiums for Part B and Part D, face deductibles, and still cover a significant portion of their medical bills out of pocket. But here is what truly surprises people. Medicare does not cover dental care, vision, hearing aids, or long-term care. These are not minor expenses. A single hearing aid can cost several $1,000s. Dental work can run tens of thousands over a lifetime. And long-term care, which we will address shortly, can cost over $100,000 per year. What makes this risk especially dangerous is that healthcare costs do not stay predictable. They grow, they surprise, and they compound over time. This is not a line item you can estimate once and forget. Healthcare in retirement demands its own dedicated, carefully constructed plan. So how do you actually prepare for this? One of the most powerful tools available is a health savings account, or HSA. If you have access to a high-deductible health plan, an HSA offers triple tax advantages. Contributions go in tax-free, growth is tax-free, and withdrawals for qualified medical expenses are tax-free. No other account does all three. But an HSA alone is not enough. Long-term care is where retirements truly get derailed. Traditional long-term care insurance has become harder to qualify for and more expensive, but hybrid life insurance policies that include long-term care riders have become a compelling alternative for many pre-retirees. Here is the critical point. The earlier you address this, the more options you have. Waiting until 65 often means higher premiums, fewer qualifying options, or being denied altogether. Planning in your 50s gives you leverage, flexibility, and peace of mind that simply is not available later. Now let's talk about the fourth risk, and this one catches people completely off guard. It's what many financial planners call the tax bomb hiding inside your traditional 401k and IRA accounts. Here's the reality. If you've been a disciplined saver your whole career, you might look at your retirement account balance and feel genuinely proud. Maybe you've got $800,000, maybe more. But here's the uncomfortable truth that most people never stop to consider. That money has never been taxed, not a single dollar. Every contribution you made went in pre-tax. Every year it grew, the IRS never touched it. So while the account statement says it belongs to you, a significant portion of that balance is essentially money you're holding on behalf of the government. You just don't know exactly how much yet. And that uncertainty is precisely what makes this risk so dangerous. Here is where things get really uncomfortable for a lot of retirees. Once you reach age 73, the IRS requires you to start withdrawing money from your traditional 401k and IRA accounts, whether you need the money or not. These are called required minimum distributions, and they can be surprisingly large depending on your balance. Now here is the problem. Those forced withdrawals count as ordinary income. When you stack them on top of your Social Security benefits, which can become up to 85% taxable, and add any investment gains or dividends, your total income can suddenly push you into a much higher tax bracket than you ever expected. Someone who felt financially comfortable at 65 can find themselves writing unexpectedly large checks to the IRS at 73. What looked like a well-funded retirement starts feeling like a tax trap. And most people never see it coming until it is already happening. Here is where smart planning can genuinely change your financial future. The years between retirement and age 73 are what many financial planners call the golden window for Roth conversions. Here is why this matters so much. When you stop working but before required minimum distributions kick in, your taxable income often drops significantly. That means you may be sitting in a lower tax bracket than you have been in decades. This is your opportunity to strategically convert portions of your traditional 401k or IRA into a Roth account, paying taxes now at those lower rates rather than later when distributions are forced and potentially larger. Every dollar you convert reduces your future required minimum distribution balance, which means smaller mandatory withdrawals, less forced taxable income, and more control over your tax situation. Plus, Roth accounts grow completely tax-free and have no required minimum distributions during your lifetime. That is a powerful combination working in your favor. Now here is the fifth risk, and honestly, it catches most people completely off guard because it has nothing to do with markets, taxes, or healthcare. It is the risk of underspending. After years of disciplined saving, many retirees find themselves emotionally unable to actually spend their money. The fear of running out becomes so overwhelming that they cut back on travel, skip family experiences, delay home improvements, and generally live far beneath what their savings could comfortably support. And here is the painful part. The years between 62 and 75 are typically your healthiest retirement years. Your energy is higher, your mobility is greater, and your ability to truly enjoy experiences is at its peak. When fear drives your financial decisions instead of a solid plan, you end up sacrificing the very moments retirement was meant to create. That is not financial responsibility. That is a quiet, costly tragedy hiding behind a healthy bank balance. Here is something most financial advisors rarely talk about. Research from the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that a significant portion of retirees actually die with more assets than they had when they first retired. And before you think that sounds like great news, consider why it happens. It is not because they planned brilliantly. It is because they were simply too afraid to spend their own money. They skipped the trips. They avoided the experiences. They said no to helping their grandchildren or treating themselves, all while sitting on accounts they never touched. That is not financial success. That is financial fear dressed up as discipline. And it represents a very real risk, one that does not show up on any spreadsheet. The risk of reaching the end of your life with full bank accounts and empty memories. Underspending is not safety. It is a different kind of loss, and it deserves to be treated as seriously as any market crash. So how do you actually give yourself permission to spend? It starts with a written retirement income plan. Not a rough estimate in your head, but a real document that maps out exactly where your money comes from each month. The key concept here is understanding your guaranteed income floor. This is the money that shows up no matter what. Think Social Security, pensions, or annuity payments. Once you know that your essential expenses are covered by guaranteed sources, everything above that becomes discretionary spending money you can use with confidence. When retirees see clearly that their bills are covered regardless of what the market does, the fear starts to dissolve. You stop second-guessing every purchase. You stop feeling guilty about the vacation or the dinner out. A clear plan does not restrict your retirement. It actually liberates it. It transforms spending from something that feels reckless into something that feels intentional, informed, and completely deserved after decades of hard work. So let's bring it all together. You've now seen the 5 risks that can quietly derail even the most carefully built retirement plan. Sequence of returns can devastate your portfolio if the market drops in your first few years. Inflation slowly erodes your purchasing power over decades. Healthcare costs can consume hundreds of thousands of dollars that most people never planned for. Tax bombs hidden inside traditional 401k and IRA accounts can push you into brackets you never expected. And underspending can rob you of the retirement experiences you actually worked so hard to enjoy. Here's the most important thing to understand. None of these risks are inevitable. Every single one of them is either avoidable or manageable, but only if you see them coming. Only if you start preparing now, before retirement begins, while you still have time and options on your side. Awareness is where everything starts. Here is something nobody talks about enough. Retirement planning is emotional. The fear of making a wrong move, of miscalculating, of somehow ruining the future you spent decades building, that fear is completely real and completely valid. You have worked too hard to take this lightly, and that pressure is understandable. But here is the hard truth. Staying paralyzed, avoiding the conversation, or hoping everything just works out, that is actually the most dangerous position you can be in. Inaction is still a choice, and it is usually the most costly one. The good news is, you do not have to solve everything today. You just have to start. Learning about sequence of returns, risk, inflation, healthcare costs, tax exposure, and spending confidence, even understanding one of these better than you did before, puts you meaningfully ahead of most people walking toward retirement without a real plan. Small steps forward still move you forward. Before you go, here is your next step. Download our free retirement risk checklist linked below. It walks you through each of the 5 risks covered today so you can assess exactly where you stand right now. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to the channel because we release new retirement planning content every week designed specifically for people in the final stretch before retirement. And if you want to go deeper, watch our related video on building a retirement income plan. It picks up right where this one leaves off. Here is the truth. Retirement does not have to be scary, complicated, or uncertain. The people who retire with confidence are not the ones who got lucky. They are the ones who got informed and took action early. You are already doing that by being here. The best retirement you can imagine starts with the decisions you make today. Now go make them.